Lisa, the badass, welcome to the show.
G'day, Boomer. Awesome to be on your show. It's such an honour. Thanks, mate. I'm really pleased.
So, we were connected through a mutual friend, Roy, who does a lot of work on my show, but also I heard your story and I was like, just shit, I need to get this woman on the show. Like, you've done so many amazing things in the endurance world. Do you mind just giving us a little bit of a recap here?
Yeah, so my background is in what they call ultra marathon running, which is
Let's just define ultra because I did
yeah.
a marathon and you know my story. It was not the most successful thing I've ever done in my life. What do you mean by ultra marathon?
Oh, congratulations for starters from having discipline to do a bloody ultra to do a marathon, because that takes a lot of dedication. So ultra marathon is basically anything over the marathon distance, which is 42 k's in New Zealand metrics. So typically these are races from 50 kilometers, 100k, 100 milers, 200, 300, and there are even races that go across entire continents, or races like in New York City that go 3,100 miles around a half-mile block. You know, there's different levels of crazy and different types of races. So this is the sort of thing that I've done for a quarter of a century because I'm quite old, and I've had some amazing experiences. I've run over 70,000 Ks in that time, done over 2,000 Ks in the Sahara. So I've done the Moroccan Sahara twice, the Tunisian, the Arabian Desert, the Libyan Desert, Niger, Jordan, Gobi Desert, Death Valley in the USA a couple of times, different
So
parts of the
let's double click on the Death Valley race because I think I'm
yeah,
familiar with that one.
yeah.
Which Death Valley race is it, or is it
So it's
is it
the
Badwater? Is it?
Badwater Ultra Marathon. That's the one, and
Okay.
that is an epic race.
Can
So
you describe that race for us? Because I
yeah,
know somebody famous who we may or may not mention here has recently not finished that and written a book. But
Mr.
let's
Goggins.
talk about let's talk about Mr. Goggins. But since you actually finished Badwater, let's get into that.
Yeah, so I've done it twice now, and this is a 135 mile or 217k race that takes place in Death Valley every year. And
Hmm.
there's about 90 odd crazy idiots who sign up for this in the middle of summer. And if anyone knows what Death Valley is, it's the hottest place on earth.
Hmm.
So temperatures get up to, I don't know, in Fahrenheit, what is it, about 130, I think, in Fahrenheit, about
I think
50,
so.
55, 56 in Celsius. Um, so bloody hot, really hot.
Mhm.
And then you're starting below sea level, and you've got these two massive mountain passes that you have to get over. And at the end, you're climbing up Mount Whitney, halfway up that. So yeah, you got the distance, you got the heat, and you've got this, huge amount of mountains to climb as well. So it's a pretty epic event.
Wow. Okay, so let's compare and contrast that versus running the Sahara, right? Like I've ridden a camel in the Sahara. Um, that was difficult enough as it is. Running on sand doesn't seem to be that easy. Is there like an
Yeah, it doesn't.
actual trail that they lay out for you, or is it just sort of like go as you
No.
may?
You just go, so you might be surprised at how many different types of deserts there are. The
Hmm.
Sahara is a massive place, obviously, and there are, all sorts of, some are stony, some are sand dunes, some are, cliffs and rocks and climbing up things. And so there's everything. So
Hmm.
it's very, very different terrain. So you typically, in the races that I've done in the Sahara, have been what they call multi-day stage races.
Hmm.
And these are like usually 250 Ks over 7 days is your sort of average. And these ones are you self-supporting. So you're carrying everything on your backpack
Hmm.
except your water. So you get given your water every day.
Okay.
Um, and you have to have all your food with you. So you're carrying 10, 12, 14 kilos on your back while you're trying to run.
And this is sand, right? And
This
so
is, yeah,
I've tried to climb dunes much to my dismay
yeah.
in places like Namibia and stuff like that. And it wasn't
Yeah.
easy. And you're running, how long was this race?
Well, so 250 Ks is sort of your
Wow.
typical one. And I've
Okay.
done some non-stop races like Niger, which was 333 kilometers. I actually failed in that one, got to the 222K mark and had food poisoning. So that was the end of that one. But yeah, generally you are in whatever is coming at you. So it could be foot deep sand that you're going through. It could be rocky, flat terrain. It could be climbing up mountains. You're very much exposed to extreme conditions, and it's all and the funny thing is, like, I'm not even a good runner. People have this conception that you're probably like a Paula Radcliffe or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so not. No genetic ability whatsoever, just a very, very stubborn mind. And with ultra marathons, it's very much about just how hard can you push, how much suffering can you take, and how much can you overcome the obstacles that come your way, and the fear, dealing with fear, and because you can be in really scary places alone. There's a whole lot of things that can happen to you, and so it's managing yourself. It's more of a survival thing, really, than racing in the normal sense of the word.
So Lisa, if you don't mind, like, because all of this is just so cool to me, right? Like, you did Badwater twice. You didn't just do it once, you did it twice. You raced in the Sahara. You've gone to Niger, which is a place that I've never even been to before. And you've done all these really cool things. I want to dive a little bit into like what your training regimen looked like during this. And then after that, I want to talk about mindset. But your training regimen because one of my complaints about marathon training is the amount of time that it takes. What does your training regimen look like for something like Badwater or one of these other races?
So in the beginning, when I first started out doing this, 25 years ago, I had no idea what I was doing. And so I was doing huge mileage, which was, 150, 200 Ks a week.
Wow.
And I didn't do anything else but run. And that was a completely wrong way to do it. It got me to the finish line when I was younger. And then I started to burn out and just blow up and hitting the wall, and problems with my hormones, and, a whole lot of physiological problems came from that approach. And then I met my coach, because back then it was a pioneering days in the sport too. We didn't even have lights properly. There wasn't all the fancy gear that there is now. And then so about 13 years ago, I met my coach, who is now my business partner in our company, our running company. And he chopped my mileage in half. He built in strength training. He built in mobility work daily. He changed my diet. He changed the supplements that I was on. He basically revolutionized the way I was training. And I'd been really broken at that point. And that was just before Death Valley. So he saved my bacon, really, because this was my most important race that I'd done. I was super excited about Death Valley. And I had the best results on that regime. So the mileage was cut in half, so typically I was only running 100 kilometers a week, 110, 120, depending on the week, and, you cycle.
Which, just to give some perspective, because I know there's a significant amount of the audience that's from the US, 100 kilometers, a marathon is 42 point something, right?
Yeah.
And so you're running multiple marathons per week. Obviously not all at once, but this is still a significant amount of mileage, right?
It is, but it isn't that much, considering that you're running then 217 Ks or 135 miles in one go. You'd think that you have to, and my mindset at the beginning was that I have to do, a huge amount of mileage. So, I mean, there were weeks, and it depends on where you are in the program and the build up. So you wouldn't start at, he would have me starting on some weeks at 60, 70 Ks, which for me at that stage was like, oh my God, I'm going to be so unfit. And actually what happened is that I actually had time to recover, and my body sort of came back online, and I, got better. And then building in the strength training helped my body stabilize, because I was very weak in the upper body. I had really strong legs, obviously. But when you're running, it makes your upper body very flaccid, and you don't have a strong back, and your hips start to get, not so strong. And so building in that strength part of the regime was crucial. And then building in the mobility so that you had good range of motion, your good posture, so that you were more upright. I remember the first race he saw me run was a 100 miler in my local town. and I was bent over like a staple at the end of it. And he was like, oh my God, she's got no core, you know?
Yeah.
And he, you know, then built that up, and I have a really strong core now. And all those things are really important pieces of the puzzle. So it's still a big time commitment, but not as big as what it used to be in my early days, where all I did was work and run. You know,
Well,
and you're working full time.
I was going to ask, were you working full time, or was this your full time job?
No, full time.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So a training regimen like this, and you know, I've done powerlifting competitions, I've done marathons. Well, I've done a marathon, and it didn't really go so well. And I've done a few things in my life, and all of them require a certain amount of discipline, but nothing to the extent of like Badwater, for instance. Let's talk about your mindset, because have you just like beaten yourself up so much that you can do anything, or how did you build this determination? I would love to just hear some insights on how that.
Yeah, I really think. I think, you know, I know that you're into epigenetics, and my epigenetic type is that, like, one of my dominant hormones is adrenaline and dopamine. So I'm very much mission driven by nature, and a risk taker by nature, and someone who pushes the limits and often jumps in without any idea of what they're getting into, and then just learns to swim along the way, you know, or learns to run along the way.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, so very much a dive in and see how it goes, sign up in the excitement of the moment, and then go, oh shit, what was I thinking, you know? So that's from a personality point of view, and I was like that since I was born, I think. I remember mum telling me at 3, you know, I'd just run off and dive into the water when I couldn't swim and things. It's just in my nature. Then I also grew up in a family where physical and mental toughness was a prerequisite to be accepted in the family.
Wow.
So I grew up with a really loving, caring, awesome, amazing mother. And my dad was also an awesome dad, but he was a hard ass. And he put a lot of pressure on us as kids to perform in sport, especially. And I was first born, and I wasn't a boy, so it was a major disappointment, I think. Thank goodness I had 2 younger brothers to share the load after me. But he would, if he had had it his way, I should have been like a, you know, special forces soldier, a career woman within, you know, 10 degrees, and I should have been, you know, an extreme sports person as well. You know, he's that type of bloke. And as a child, that was tough, because I wanted to please my dad, as little girls do. And so I did my best, and I was very much trying to prove and want to be accepted by my dad, you know, and I was never quite good enough. So in my childhood, I was a gymnast, and I was quite good until I got to puberty, and I, you know, grew too tall and too athletic and too, you know, it wasn't the tiny little build you need to be for a gymnast. And so I was a major disappointment for my dad when I pulled out of that at 15, and he thought that I was about to represent my country, and I knew that I wasn't, you know, I knew that, and that caused a hell of a lot of self-esteem problems. So as a young girl, especially in the gymnastics world, I was dealing with eating disorders and a very bad self-esteem, considered fat, you know, by my coaches when I was not fat. I was just a healthy young girl, you know.
I've heard that in gymnastics in particular quite a bit.
It's very much that in ballet. It really can be horrific if you're not built that way, you know. And now I know I understand epigenetics. I'm not built for that. So then I tried other things, and I just failed, and then I got into the running, and I had in my early 20s a boyfriend from Austria who was an extreme athlete, and I was attracted to men who were hard asses, again, because that's what my dad had been, I think, when I look back in a psychological point of view with hindsight. And so he was never happy, and I was never good enough, and he would push me to the absolute limits. And we spent years cycling around the world, climbing mountains, you know, and this is where I started to learn what I was actually capable of. But there wasn't a lot of enjoyment. It was more about trying to please somebody and prove something to someone.
Okay.
And that relationship lasted 5 years and ended up, you know, quite an abusive relationship. And my self-esteem was even lower than, you know, it could possibly be. And then in we were doing a crossing of the Libyan desert as a part of a 4-person expedition. So I wasn't even into ultras at this stage, but this was my first major encounter with a desert. And in the middle of this, so this was an illegal crossing of the Libyan desert. We've got.
This is obviously a few years ago before Gaddafi went bye-bye kind of thing, right?
Absolutely, yeah, long time. We're talking 1997 here. I'm very old.
You're not very old. Come on.
I'm certainly not in my head, but apparently according to my birth date. And so we were in this extreme situation. We had only 2 liters of water a day, which was in those temperatures, insane. And the reason we only had the 2 liters was we couldn't carry any more than that, because we had to cover 250 odd kilometers, and we had to have it all in our backpack because there was no.
So, hold on, I have to double click on that. 250 kilometers in one day in the Libyan desert. Is that right?
No, 7 days. It took
7 days. Okay, fine. Okay, because I was gonna one day is that's pretty impossible.
Yeah, that would be impossible. So 7 days, but we had to carry 35 kilo backpacks.
Wow.
Well, I had 35, and I only weighed about 59 kilos. So this was more than nearly 2/3 of my body weight, sort of, almost. And so I couldn't even get up off the ground without the guys putting me on my feet. And we were covering 45 kilometers a day with these backpacks and only 2 liters of water. And so we were extremely on the edge of what's possible as far as dehydration is concerned.
So is that all salt water at that point, or what? You have to have some other things besides just water to keep yourself hydrated, right?
No, so you have electrolytes. So we had salt tablets, but that was about it back then. We didn't have anything fancier than that. We didn't understand anything about potassium and magnesium and all those sort of things. Really, we didn't. We had no idea.
Wow.
And in the middle of this desert, which we are all suffering dreadfully from the thirst, you can imagine, the boyfriend has a major domestic with me and leaves me. And says after 4 days of being in the desert, and this has been a rocky, hard relationship, and this is the first time we've ever done anything with anyone else, and they're looking at this guy going, you can't treat her like that. And I'm starting to realize that this isn't normal. And he was trying to do a book for the expedition, and he wanted to photograph, and he wanted me to help him, and I literally was on the edge of my capabilities. I was unable to do running around helping him set up photos. And so this came to a head, and on day 4, he said, right, that's it, the relationship's over, I'm leaving, you guys are too slow, I'm out of here. And he literally left me in the middle of the Libyan desert with the 2 other guys. I didn't know whether he'd survive. I didn't know whether we'd survive. We were on the edge of what was, possible. The dehydration was really starting to get to us. So, body shutting down, basically. And to be fair to him, we were in agony. And tempers were short. So anyway, he left, and that was a real crux point in my life where I went, and that's it. I'm not taking this shit any longer. And I realized I had to compartmentalize, because I wanted to fall to pieces. I wanted to cry and be a mess, as you are when you have a breakup of a relationship. And I couldn't, because I'm in the middle of the desert. I've got to survive, and these 2 other guys are relying on me to, get my stuff together and get through. And so I had to learn to really put all that aside and just keep moving. And the 3 of us, we did this, we did it amazingly. I had major problems on day 6 with my body just shutting down and starting to shut down. I was hoarding the water because I was so terrified of running out of water that I'd actually only been having 1.5 liters of the day, and my central nervous system was starting to shut down, and I was hallucinating. I was all over the place. Anyway, long story short, we got to the end of that, and that changed my life, though. It took me 2 years to physically recover from it. I had massive kidney problems after that.
I can imagine.
And, in the aftermath of the psychological stuff to deal with. But that experience, I loved the desert. I actually loved the desert. And it took me 2 years, but I was reading in a magazine about this ultra marathon in Morocco. And I thought, I could do that, because it was touted at that time as the toughest race on earth. And I was comparing it to what I'd just done in the Libyan desert. And I thought, I can do this. This is the same distance. We've only got to carry our food. We don't have to carry our water. We get 9 liters of water a day. And there's doctors, and there's, airplanes, and there's people that can save us. And there's 700 runners. And So I signed up on that, and that was my very first ultra, and I never looked back. I loved it. And I
Had you
suddenly
done a
had
marathon before that?
no,
so,
I
so
have never run a marathon.
your first
Yeah,
race was uh,
a
remind
200.
me 200 plus kilometer in the desert,
Yeah,
Sahara Desert, which again, like I've done the Sahara Desert, but on the back of a camel
yeah.
on the Algerian border. But like, this is incredible. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so essentially you just push yourself to a breaking point and said that nothing will break you ever again.
Exactly, and compared to when you push yourself outside your comfort zone and you lift your horizon of what you're capable of,
Yeah.
and that's the beautiful thing about this, because people often ask me, why the hell would you do that? You know,
Yeah.
like, it's obviously not a lot of fun, and it's painful, and the discipline required, and the money, it costs a lot of money to go to these events. You don't get it, you don't get paid. You have to usually search for sponsors for a year and so on. But the real value lies in what you learn about yourself and how
Yeah.
you overcome obstacles, and the character building side of it, and the mental toughness that you get out of it. And this is where the real value, it doesn't lie in the value of running from A to B, which is some arbitrary thing that some humans come up with.
Hmm.
It's really the journey that you go on the inside, as they say. And it really is, because you push yourself to places you can't imagine, and when you go beyond those and you're still standing, that gives you strength for life. That gives
Wow.
you an ability to persist and overcome things, and to try things, and to never be limited again. And
Mhm.
especially when you do this repeatedly over and over and over again. Um, and there are some downsides to that as well. There's some post-traumatic stress that's gone on.
Yeah.
There's some physical damage that I've done to my body, unknowingly, because I didn't have all the information, back then. Now we know a lot more. So there's downsides of it as well. But it stood me really in good stead for the obstacles and the challenges that I've had to face in my life, which have also been,
Mhm.
numerous, shall we say. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. I want just like to give a couple people takeaways on this, because if you're gonna do an event like, let's say you wanted to do an ultra, and after my first marathon, I said I'll never do one again, and now I'm like,
Yeah.
maybe. Um,
Yeah.
if you wanted to do an ultra, what are three things people should think about first before doing an ultra? Whether it be tips you have on mindset, or just how to get themselves into a position where they can make an informed decision on whether or not they're ready.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. For a start, get a good coach.
Yeah.
Obviously, a good plug for us, because that's what we do, is our day job.
Hmm.
Um, but it's about having the right information and understanding that your body is capable of so much more than you are able to understand right now. And
Hmm.
that goes for everybody. And you don't need to be a super fast. You don't need to be super talented. You just have to want to do this and be willing to go through this transformation. And when you
Hmm.
have a bad experience, like you sound like you had a bit of a bad experience at the marathon, that's just a learning curve.
Yeah,
there,
exactly.
it's just like there's so many races, Boomer, where I'm not telling you where I failed. Where I absolutely bit the dust and failed miserably, and I've learned more from those ones than I actually did from the successes. And it's not just a cliche; it's real. Um, and so having a good structure is really good.
Hmm.
A good program, and having a holistic program that builds in your strength work and your mobility work, that works on your nutrition, your supplementation, and your mindset, not just running miles.
Hmm.
All of these things are part of doing an ultra marathon and a marathon, in fact. Um, so you need to have that good, and you need to be surrounded by people that are doing this. Because if you're just surrounded by, like, 99.9% of the population don't know what the hell an ultramarathon is.
Yeah.
So you need to be surrounded by people who get this, who know the problems that come up, who can guide you through that, and it can also, because people are going to come up to you and go, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? I don't get it. My brothers still say to me, I'd rather poke my eyes out with needles than do what you do. I don't
Hmm.
get it. People don't get it. And so you'll have a lot of negativity in your environment, possibly, about you doing this. And then people that believe that's not possible. You know, I just had it. We trained a lady recently who just did a 200 miler. Like that's a real long way. And she's a mum of 3, and she's not a svelte running, you know, looking elite athlete. She's a full-time position, and her daughter went to school and said, my mummy's running a 200-mile race, and the teacher told the daughter off for lying. You are lying. That is
it's just I mean, I would guess it's possible. I have so many questions there, including like how much time you have to dedicate per day to your training. But wow, that's crazy.
Not as much as you think.
Yeah.
No more than you would for an Ironman, you know. Okay. So we do it, the way we train is that it's a minimum effective dose as far as your mileage is concerned.
Yep.
So you don't need to be putting in junk miles, which was the old way, where you just ran and you ran and you ran. Now, you know, like we have a lot of our programs. So let's take 100K, for example. You're running a 100K event. Most of the trainings weeks will be in the 40 to 60 kilometer range. And then a couple of strength training sessions in the gym or at home with body weight exercises, and then daily little mobility workouts. So that's 10 minutes on the foam roller, or stretching or yoga or something of that nature. So that's not a huge time commitment for a pretty serious race.
Yeah.
But that will get you there. That won't get you there to the podium, but that will get you through the race in some good, decent shape, prepared for the actual challenge that you've got ahead. So that the highest amount of kilometers you'll be doing for an event like this, my husband's doing one at the moment. We're doing for a charity run an 84K. Wow. And you know, his biggest training run is 40K. So you don't need to go, you know, and that's once, you know. So it's not horrendous. It's not horrendous at all. With 10 hours a week, you can do that. You can do it.
So let's talk, because the last time you and I spoke was when I was in Seoul, and I got to meet your mom, and I want to talk about that transition and how that worked. Did you go from doing all of these ultra marathons around the world to what's going on with your mom, which is fascinating.
Yeah. So this is where these lessons that I've been talking about really come into play. So 4 years ago, my mum, who I said is the most amazing, incredible woman, had an aneurysm, which is a bleed in the brain, and subsequently a stroke as well. When this happened, they didn't think she'd survive. It was a massive, severe, you know, hanging on for dear life situation, was in and out of a coma, 4 weeks in ICU. We had a medical blunder from the very get-go in emergency, where they thought she was having a migraine and ignored it for hours on end. It took 6 hours for them to finally do a CT scan and see that blood was right throughout the brain. And it took them 18 hours because she had to be flown somewhere. So before they got her into surgery to take the blood off the brain and get a stent put in. So all of these medical blunders that happened along the way really made me hyper vigilant. When she survived that, then I was like, I'm not going to be caught short again, because I had not known what to ask for at the very beginning. Yeah. And I'm going to research the hell out of this, and I'm going to help my mum come back. So she was 3 weeks in and out of a coma. And when she was losing more and more of her brain as that time went on, because of what they call vasospasms, which is when the blood and the brain don't mix and they cause spasms and you lose different parts of the brain. When she eventually stabilized and woke up, she had basically hardly any higher function. So she was unable to move anything in a coordinated fashion. She had no spatial awareness, no ability to even sit, or she had no memory. She had a couple of words, and that was it. And she, you know, after months in rehab, and I was just studying hard out everything I could about brain injury and brain function and how I could get her brain back on track. And the doctors were telling me, look, she's 74. She's not going to do anything again. There's no hope. There's massive brain damage. Make her comfortable. And there's one thing, I don't do comfortable, you know. Yeah. I'm not about comfortable. I'm about overcoming and challenges. And so I had a hell of a battle on my hands in the hospital itself, where they wanted to just, you know, put her away in a aged care facility after the rehabilitation and so on. and be done with it. And I was like, no, she's coming back. I'm getting my mum back.
Mm-hmm.
And I started studying. Now, I've done a lot of races at altitude in the Himalayas as well.
Yeah.
And I've worked with altitude training. So I've had a tent at one stage where I slept in it. I called a hypoxico tent, and it takes a part of the oxygen out. And the reason you do this is to adapt to altitude, so that when you go there, you can hopefully run, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I had one of these, and I went in this for months in the build up to a 222k race in northern India in the Himalayas. And I went up too fast, too quickly. So it was 6,500 meters that I was sleeping at every night, which is about a third of the oxygen level that we normally have, or less than a third. Mm-hmm. And I didn't follow the instructions, which was really stupid, because I was an impatient, running out of time, got to get there quicker type of person. So what happened is I ended up with a hypoxic brain concussion.
Wow.
And I started to have infections also. When you don't have enough oxygen in the body, the infections start to proliferate and go, you start to have real big problems with infections. Mm-hmm. And I was seeing these things in my mum. I was seeing the infections. So he had that experience. And then I was in the hospital, and she had these infections in her mouth and other, places we won't mention. And I was thinking, this is a lack of oxygen that's going on here.
Yeah.
And she was sleeping 20, 21 hours a day. I think she's got sleep apnea. Mm-hmm. So the doctors wouldn't listen to me. And I brought in an outside consultant. We did a sleep apnea test, came back with severe sleep apnea. So she was stopping breathing many hundred times a night.
Yeah.
And this was, of course, knocking off whatever brain cells she had left, mm-hmm. and killing her. And if I hadn't picked that up, then, I think she'd be long, long gone.
Yeah.
So we put her on a CPAP machine. So that was my first win, if you like. And then, mm-hmm. she started to have a little weeny bit more function, because she was having the oxygen. And then I thought, what else can oxygen do? And I discovered something called hyperbaric oxygen therapy, which is used extensively around the world. Not enough, but it is an amazing therapy that hyperoxygenates the body and can be very, very beneficial for brain injury. Mm-hmm. But in my country, it's not accepted as an evidence-based therapy. We have it in our Auckland and Christchurch hospitals, but they only use it for wound healing and gangrene and burns and so on. So mm-hmm. I could not get access to it. So I studied Dr. Harcher's work, who's in America, and he's one of the world's leading experts on it. Read his books, read everything I possibly could about hyperbaric, and go, I've got to get her this access. So when I finally came to letting her out of the hospital, and they wanted to put her in a home, and I said, no, I've got to take her home. I'm going to look after her. And they said, there's no way you can. 24 hours around the clock, 7 days. There's no way you're going to cope as a family. And I believe that when she's in her own environment, and she knows on some level that she's loved and wanted and surrounded by her things, that this will help her memory. And I felt it very, very important that I take her home. And I had a real battle with that. And they would not give me the resources, which is just like a caregiver in the morning and the evening to help with personal cares. Mm-hmm. And so I got my very big brother, who looks like The Rock, and he came with me to the hospital one day, and we suddenly got the resources we needed, without saying too much more. And, that really makes me angry that people have to go to that sort of a level to get help.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I got her home, and I had found a dive company that had one of these hyperbaric chambers, who was literally down the road, which was just a miracle. And I went mm-hmm. to these people and I said, can I use your chamber? And they said, yes, sign a legal waiver, take full responsibility medically. No doctor would give me sign off. And so I took responsibility. I signed the legal waiver, and we went down there every day, and these incredible people gave us this access to this machine, mm-hmm. 5 days a week for 2 hours a day with a hyperbaric technician. Amazing. After 33 treatments, taking this very frail, very fragile, sick mum, putting her on a forklift in a commercial factory into this massive, big, what looks like an LPG cylinder. Mm-hmm. And people thought I was completely nuts. But after 33 sessions there, she started to wake up, and she started to have little bits of words, little bits of memory. and started to trying to move her arms and things like this. And I was like, oh my God, this is working. And then the chamber got taken off on a contract and I lost access to it. So then I mortgaged the house and I bought a chamber, and I put her through, over the next 3 years, I put her through another 250 sessions. And as she started to come back, I had more to work with. And so I developed my own protocols and my own therapies, and I had about an 8-hour program a day for the past 4 years. And it covered off everything from functional neurology to things like nootropics, a radical change in diet, physiotherapy, of course, for hours on end, speech therapy, everything that I could learn. So I just went into full research mode for 4 years, basically, and I'm still in there. And on this journey, I learned just so much about the human body. And if I hadn't had that background as an ultramarathon runner who knew that the mind and the body are capable of far more than what anybody believes. So when a doctor says to me, there is no hope, her brain is too old, it will not change, it will not, I found doctors like Dr. Norman Doidge who said neuroplasticity happens from the cradle to the grave, and I found people that told me I could, instead of listening to the ones who told me I couldn't. And I just persisted, and I had a hell of a lot of pushback from the medical community, also from my family and my friends, who were just going, why are you torturing your mother every day? Why are you putting her through? Because they couldn't see the end goal, the vision that I had. And I had no background in this, but I believed with all my heart, and I was desperate, because love, when you love someone, you'll pull out all the stops. Yeah. At this point, I stopped running myself, the long distance stuff, because I had to fully focus on her, and I was still running 2 businesses as well. So I work all day with her, and I'd work all night on my businesses and burnt myself out completely, but that's another story. But now 4 years later, my mum is completely normal again. She is talks normally, reading, writing. Her intellect is completely normal. She's at pre-aneurysm levels for all her tests. She has her full driver's license, and she walks a couple of Ks a day. We go to the gym every single day. She's my walking miracle, and that at the age of now 78 years old. And so this story is a culmination of bringing together the fact that we live in a time when we get access to podcasts like this. We can learn from doctors and scientists at the cutting edge of what is out there. We don't have to take what the local doctor says is the gospel anymore. Yep. And then combine that with the fact that I have a background in pushing the body and the mind to the absolute limit, and you get a good combination. And then I also had the perfect storm, and that once my mum started to wake up as to what happened to her, which took about 9 or 10 months before she had any sort of memory or coherence or any, consciousness. Well, when she started to wake up, she fought as hard as I did. And that was the key factor, because if I had someone that pushed and didn't want to and was lazy and didn't, wouldn't cooperate and wouldn't go through this, very arduous routine every day, and still does, then I wouldn't have been able to do that. So the combination of her willingness, my background, and the time and age that we're living in has meant that we've created a miracle, and that she's back to normal now. And so I've just written a book.
Wow. Yeah. Let's talk about the book. When does the book come out?
The book comes out in March. So March the 11th in New Zealand, and it will be available in America and places like that, and overseas on Amazon. Awesome. And it's called Relentless.
Fitting title. Yeah,
it's a cool site. But that's exactly what we needed to be, relentless. And it's a story about love and hope and overcoming the odds, and it's a very powerful, and I'm really passionate about getting this book out into the entire world if I can have my way, because I want people to have a guiding light. No matter, you don't have to be going through a brain injury, but it'll help. There's a lot of therapies listed in there, and all the things that I did. I know you've done a V-Light, for example. That was one of them. She's still got an intranasal infrared thing up her nose every day. There's a whole raft of therapies that I mention and talk about, and the resources are in there. But more than that, it's about the mindset and the ability to walk in faith when everybody is telling you no, and to walk into the darkness with the belief that you can do it and overcome the odds.
This is such a powerful message, Lisa. I could talk to you for hours about this, because I want to pick apart your training programs and all of this stuff. And I'm sure we're going to have another conversation.
I hope so,
Uh,
mate.
but
That'd be awesome.
let's we need to wrap this up for now. But Lisa, where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, I'd love people to reach out to me. My website is lisatamati.com. So that's just Lisa, LISA .com is my website. That's the best place. Or you can find me on Instagram and on Facebook. I'm very active at Lisa Tamati.
Hmm.
And yeah, I'd love people to reach out to me if you've got any questions around all these sort of topics. If you need help with running,
Hmm.
if you need help with brain injuries or anything like that, please, reach out to me. I'd love to help.
Awesome. There's this North Pole marathon that I've been like eyeing, and if I do
What?
decide to go ahead with it, I'm totally going to reach out to you. But Lisa, and
Not me. You.
I hope I actually didn't just get myself pregnant by mentioning that on the show. But Lisa, thank you so much for taking the time. This has been absolutely incredible. And guys, for the show notes on this one, which will include all of the races, the crazy things that Lisa has done, go to decodingsuperhuman.com/Lisa, Lisa. Lisa, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Boomer, and North Pole's waiting for you, mate.
Oh, gosh. Have a great day, everyone.